This could be the final showdown. Everything California has been doing, the policies that they've been implementing, might finally be coming to a head and headed for a face to face showdown with President Trump in DC. This could be it. All the policies that California has been pushing for decades are now finally coming home to roost. And what is happening in LA might be bigger than ICE raids and illegal immigration. Although that is a big part of it, it might be just a part of a bigger fight that is happening here between California and President Trump. Let me get into it. First off, we know the whole issue about ICE raids, and this is what prompted the protests. And nobody should be surprised about the fact that California is not a fan of deportations, that they have up and down the coast instituted sanctuary city status, that they've become a sanctuary state, basically promising that they will never work with federal law enforcement for deportations. It's become a resistant state against Donald Trump and DC in this particular instance. Now, I don't remember actually hearing about whether they were still sanctuary cities or sanctuary states under Biden, but that might be because the border was completely open under him. While this is the number one issue, it's definitely the biggest part of everything that's happening here in California. And I've said on the show numerous times, we are either a country of laws or we're not. And either we follow the immigration laws that are on the books, as imperfect as they may be, or we don't. And what other laws start to go by the wayside? California's continued resistance to comply with federal law on immigration has put them right smack dab in the middle of this fight. And yes, I'm not going to sit here and say it's no coincidence that President Trump and Tom Homan have targeted California specifically, because I think there is a big showdown happening. And I think it's a bigger message to California than just ICE and immigration. And I think that the White House has been very clear about why they are doing this, and they are not backing down. Just from this video that was released today from the press conference with Caroline Leavitt, it's very clear they are not backing down.
Words, the position of the Democrat Party is that the federal government is not allowed to enforce our laws and to arrest and deport illegal alien criminals. They're attempting to use a violent mob as a weapon against their own constituents to prevent the enforcement of immigration law. This is deeply un-American and morally reprehensible. President Trump received a clear mandate from voters to reverse the illegal invasion ushered in by Joe Biden's open border, and to end the lawlessness represented by Karen Bass in Gavin Newsom's California. President Trump promised to carry out the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and left-wing riots will not deter him in that effort. Sanctuary cities and states will no longer be allowed to shield illegal criminals from deportation. Just take a look at some of the illegal monsters who were taken off the streets in Los Angeles in recent days. A Vietnamese national, a known gang member with a conviction for second-degree murder. A Mexican national with convictions for child molestation who was armed with a dangerous weapon and had previous arrests for robbery and domestic violence. A Filipino national with convictions of rape, assault, burglary, and theft. A Mexican national convicted of statutory rape, narcotics violations, and hit and run. A Nicaraguan national with convictions for domestic violence and hit and run, and a previous arrest for willful cruelty to a child. And an illegal alien from Mexico who was arrested after allegedly throwing a Molotov cocktail at law enforcement officers during the Paramount riots on Saturday. He is now being charged with attempted murder. Law-abiding American citizens do not want these public safety threats living in their communities, no matter what Democrats like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom may claim. And let this be an unequivocal message to left-wing radicals in other parts of the country who are thinking about copycatting the violence in an effort to stop this administration's mass deportation efforts. You will not succeed. Any lawlessness will only strengthen this president's resolve to defend the majority of Americans who want to live their lives peacefully, free from the fear of violent criminal illegal aliens. As President Trump said, order will be maintained and illegal aliens will be...
And Caroline Leavitt is right. We've talked about this where the American people were not shocked that this is the action President Trump is taking on immigration. that this is what he promised he was going to do, and this is the action that he's going to take. This should really come as no surprise to anybody who's really been paying attention to politics since the past couple of years. President Trump has been an immigration hawk, and this goes all the way back to prior to 2016. And the fact that you shouldn't be surprised that President Trump ran on a strong platform of immigration and mass deportation and enforcing federal immigration laws, and is now following through with it. Now, of course, California has its own set of problems. Obviously, there is the budget deficits, there's the wildfires, there's the losing of businesses and thousands of businesses every year, the amount of people who have left California. Those are all big issues that California has to face. But this is an issue that they think they can clamor onto and get the support of. But I don't think they're getting the support that they think they are. Specifically in LA with the riots and everything that's going on, it looks like it's turning around a lot of people, and people are not really a fan of what's happening here in LA. They're not a fan of the violence. They're not a fan of what's happening. They're not a fan of people out in the street destroying property in Waymos and lighting cars on fire and waving the flag of a foreign country. So I think that they're on the wrong side of this. But regardless, this is the fight that they have chosen to pick. They stuck with the sanctuary city status. They've stuck with the sanctuary state status, and they have made it a point to protect at all costs all undocumented citizens here in California. And not only protect undocumented citizens, but also to give as much freebies to undocumented citizens as possible, as we saw with Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is broke because they allowed every undocumented citizen, any age, doesn't matter, to come onto the system, and it broke the system in less than a year. So this protection of undocumented citizens is definitely one big fight. It's definitely the biggest fight that has caused this, but I think it's part of an overall showdown. I think this all culminates in what's happening here in LA, because there's other factors at play that I've noticed that go, this is California. And everything that California and all the policies that they have pushed are all coming to a head here. Now, also on Friday, David Huerta, who is the president of SEIU California, it is an enormous union organization here in California. He was arrested for impeding a federal agent. Now, a little bit about David Huerta. He's a 58-year-old president of a statewide janitors union in the Service Employees and International Union, California. Was arrested by federal agents Friday outside a Los Angeles garment warehouse where protesters gathered to watch and oppose apparent workplace immigration raid. Now, if you've paid any attention to California politics, unions and California Democrats go together like peanut butter and jelly. They are simpatico with each other. They are in line with each other. Democrats really don't do anything in the state of California without the union's approval. California State Pipefitters Council, California Medical Association, California Dental, these are all unions that end up donating hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to Democrats up and down the state. So when someone like David Huerta is arrested, it's no shock that every Democrat within earshot flies into LA to make sure that David Huerta is okay, including Maxine Waters, who flew in and was denied based on this video.
No, I want you to, hello, Congresswoman Waters. I just came to use my congressional authority to check on David.
Ma'am, we're lobbying securely now to all visitors.
Excuse me, I need to get in.
Contact our public affairs office.
I need to get in.
What are you hoping to do, Congresswoman?
I just want to see David Huerta. Right.
Would a congressperson normally be able to enter the...
Normally, yes.
What is happening here?
Well, there were some of the authorities, I don't know who they were, and I'm trying to get in to see David Huerta, who they have arrested. He is the head of SEIU local union here. I don't know why he was targeted.
Notice that Maxine Waters only cared about whether David Huerta was all right. She didn't fly in to make a special appearance to make sure any of the other detainees were all right. I guess she doesn't really care about those other detainees. Her only concern was as long as David Huerta's okay. Well, she knows which side her bread is buttered. She wanted to fly all the way out to make sure that the president of one of the largest unions in California was well taken care of and well looked after, because God forbid we can't have the president of one of the largest unions in California be miserable or uncomfortable or not know that one of these Democrats didn't show up to make sure that he was okay. So, a little bit more about him at SEIU California, Huerta leads a union with nearly 750,000 members, which is a heavyweight in statewide politics. It represents a wide range of workers, from nurses and university researchers to janitors and public sector employees. So, it's all different subsects of this larger union. Quote, "Everyone knows him," said Lorena Gonzalez, leader of the California Labor Federation, a politically powerful statewide group of unions. Huerta is also vice president of the Federation's board. So he's in charge of two unions. Quote, "He's been around for a very long time in the movement. We sounded the alarm and everyone stood up." Yeah, because everybody wants to make sure that they get their campaign donations. Again, California Democrats don't do anything in California without the union's approval. I want to show this real quick because this is from SEIU. So you can go to Follow the Money, which is one of my favorite pages. And if you go to SEIU, this is West Local 1877. This is a list of the top people that this union has donated to. And look at this. This is a who's who of politicians here in California. So when I say that unions basically run the California Democratic Party, I am not kidding, because you can look this up on followthemoney.org. You can go check it out. Look at this. These are the who's who of people. Gavin Newsom right there at the top. Ricardo Lara, who is the state insurance commissioner. Former governor Jerry Brown. You have Elena Koulinakis, who is the lieutenant governor, also running for governor here. Buffy Wicks is an assembly member out in the Bay Area. Leticia Perez, Josh Newman, Buffy Wicks again, Rob Bonta, who is the attorney general, Anthony Rendon, who is the former speaker of the assembly, Buffy Wicks again. And the list goes on and on. Tony Atkins, who was also the head of the Senate for a while. Mia Bonta, who is the wife of Rob Bonta, who is the attorney general. You have Koti Patrice Norris, who is an assembly member. This is just goes on and on and on and on. Cecilia Aguilar Curry. You can just keep going down these names one by one by one and see how much the SEIU donates to all of these people. And just another tip about, and just for another example, outside of SEIU, when I say that unions run California Democrats, Gavin Newsom knows this firsthand. If you go to Follow the Money and look at this, you can look at his top donors: California Professional Firefighters Association, California Teachers Association, California State Pipe Trades Council, California Dental Association, California Medical Association, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up and I'm hammering this whole issue with David Huerta as the president of SEIU is because this is another element of this showdown. Unions control California Democrats. And if David Huerta and other unions tell these Democrats they have to oppose immigration laws and they have to oppose ICE and federal enforcement, they have to do it. It doesn't matter how unpopular it is. As the polls continue to dip more and more out of favor for Democrats opposing these federal laws, a CNN poll just came out the other day that said in 2020, it was a plus 20 points, those in favor of people who were here illegally. Now in 2024, it is -6. That is an enormous swing in the negative for those who are in favor of anybody here illegally. And it doesn't matter how much and how far these polls go down. If unions like David Huerta and SEIU and California Teachers Association, they are the ones who say, nope, you're going to enforce this. You're going to resist ICE. You're going to resist this federal immigration, all of this stuff. They have to do it. And it puts them in this bind where Yes, boss, I have to listen to what you say because you control the purse strings and we have to listen to you no matter how unpopular this is. It goes deeper than you think about unions. So, this is another part of it where if unions are controlling or having a part of all of these riots and these protests, because SEIU was out there with asking for people to show up and to protest, that's another aspect of this. The final showdown that I think is probably the biggest thing that Trump either crosses the Rubicon and puts his foot down, or as a country, we may never turn back from it. Because, yes, in this federalism style of government that we have, there are procedures, there are laws, there's the Constitution, there's the Supremacy Clause, there is the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government to enforce immigration. And we now have a showdown between California and the United States as a whole and federal government. And are you going to listen to our laws? Are you going to abide by the fact that the US Constitution grants the federal government exclusive jurisdiction to enforce immigration laws and protect the borders? And if California is going to say, no, we're not going to listen to your federal enforcement, we're not going to enforce federal immigration laws, we're not going to comply, that might be the biggest showdown between Gavin Newsom and President Trump. Whether or not a state can quite literally thumb its nose at not only the will of the president, who was duly elected and elected by a landslide, but the American people who voted for this type of enforcement. And it's not only thumbing their nose at the federal government. I would argue that Gavin Newsom in California are quite literally thumbing their nose at democracy and the people's voice. Because at the end of the day, President Trump was elected on a platform of mass deportation and stricter immigration enforcement. And when California says, nope, we're not going to listen to it, we don't care that you have the power, we're quite literally thumbing our nose at what the people want. And California is not immune to this, right? This is not California's first time thumbing their nose at a democratic process. So for as much as Gavin Newsom crows and crows and crows about democracy, and democracy is at a crossroads, and he has a whole pack called Campaign for Democracy, at the end of the day, Gavin Newsom actually hates democracy. And so do California Democrats. Because Prop 36, this is the best example that I can show you. Prop 36, which passed last year by an overwhelming amount, every single county in California voted to approve Prop 36. And you would be hard pressed to find any issue in the state of California that brings every single county in agreement. You'd be very hard pressed to find any issue in California. And even though it was approved by a large majority, by 70% approval to 30% no, they have not funded it. Gavin Newsom refused in his budget to fund Prop 36. And even though constitutionally he is required to implement what a proposition is voted for and approved on, he's chosen, I'm just not going to fund it. And Gavin Newsom, who hated the idea of Prop 36 to begin with, he ran campaign after campaign and introduced bills, and he tried to do his best to stop Prop 36. He hates the will of the voters. So you have these three issues that are coming to a final showdown here in California. And I think this might be either President Trump wins out and this is the path the country goes on, or California wins out and then that's an even worse path, because that could be disastrous for our entire union as a country. And that's what I'm kind of scared of. And that's why I saw all of these elements coming into one giant chaotic melting pot down in LA. Number one, the biggest issue is illegal immigration and California's protection of undocumented citizens. I would say that is number one. And this is what protesters are out there protesting. And this is what rioters are using as an excuse to burn down a city. That's the biggest thing. But I would say the second thing also comes in the fact that the unions who control California Democrats and California Democrats control California, if they say that California Democrats have to buckle down and double down on these policies and thumb their nose at the Trump administration, they're going to, at the cost of punishing people in those cities like Los Angeles or San Diego or anywhere these protests are happening. That's number two, the union control. And do California Democrats break away from unions? Do they say, this is getting too unpopular, we're going to have to stop listening to you? Is that something else? Is that going to be the next thing that falls? Is it that unions get too powerful? And will that be able to be stopped? And the third and final thing that I think is probably the most important is whether or not California actually wants to be a part of this system that we call the United States. Do they want to be a state in the United States? Do they want to acknowledge that the federal government has certain areas it has exclusive jurisdiction over, the supremacy clause, that there is a style of federalism that was baked into why we set the country up the way we did? Are they going to acknowledge that and want to be a cooperating part of the United States, or are they not? And finally, are they going to listen to the American people? If the American people across the country are overwhelmingly in support of stricter enforcement of immigration laws and mass deportation, will California continue to thumb its nose at all of this like it does with things they don't like? So will California be on this path where is the ultimate protection of undocumented citizens, no matter whether their status, whether they have prior crimes, anything? Is it always going to be the undocumented citizen is untouchable compared to the normal California citizen? Is it the fact that the unions are going to keep controlling California and making them go down a road that is unpopular? Are the unions going to lose that control based on this issue? And finally, is California going to acknowledge that it is part of the United States? That is a federalism system that they have to listen to the federal government, the Constitution, the Supremacy Clause, the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government to handle immigration? And is it going to listen to the voice of the American people? This is the showdown. And I think for President Trump, he might know this is the showdown. There are a lot of things at stake here for California that are bubbling up after decades of control in Los Angeles. And I think he knows that this is much bigger than just immigration. And like I said, whichever way it ends up going is going to have an impact on the rest of the country. But what do you think? Let me know your thoughts. Do you think this is the final showdown between California and all its policies and President Trump? And is it all facing off in Los Angeles? Or do you think this is only just about ICE raids? Let me know in the comments and see you on the next one. Later.